All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into my official college football week number 10 hot takes, where I go over some of my hottest takeaways from the college football week 10 action. Starting off with Alabama. Guys, I still have Alabama winning out, finishing 10-2, but what a major letdown season it was. A lot of people don't remember the narrative going into this season. It was a sure thing. Ohio State, Alabama, both in the playoff. And guys, it came down to Alabama. Two very close losses, both on the road. But the Alabama team just simply did not have the elite wide receiver this year. I think they're boosters. I think Nick Saban, they're really kicking themselves. To me, they're one elite receiver away. Two very close losses on the road. This is a very good team, but what a major letdown season. I do think they'll beat Ole Miss next week because Ole Miss is kind of a fraud when you look at their schedule and you look at who they've beaten. Still, what a letdown of a season for Alabama, and what a great changing of the guard for college football with both Clemson and Alabama very likely not being in the playoff. This is great for the parity of the sport. Get potentially some new teams in there, but of course we still do have the Ohio States of the world, the Georgias of the world, who possibly could make it. Number 2, Tennessee is still alive. They're still alive and well. They certainly need a few things to happen. They're not going to have any more resume-building wins. They very likely will finish the SEC East, schedule with one loss. They're not going to the SEC Championship. Georgia will go. It just depends now at this point. Does an Oregon move in front of them if they're a one-loss team? Does the loser of Ohio State, Michigan, go in front of a Tennessee? When you look at the resumes, I think that's where Michigan's really in trouble because Michigan's non-conference is so bad. We're going to see how all the metrics shake out, but Tennessee needs to win out. They need to look impressive. I think if you're a Tennessee fan, you have to be a little bit encouraged that game against Georgia wasn't more of a blowout, because to me, that game looked a lot more like a 34-6 type final than the actual final score of 27-13. Their offense was completely shut down. Georgia in the first half, it was big play after big play, but the final score wasn't terrible. So Tennessee, as long as they keep winning, you've only got one loss, you are still alive. And then of course it depends. If TCU goes undefeated, they're going to be in front of Tennessee. But if TCU loses a single game, I think the Big 12 is probably completely out of the playoff at that point. Number 3, Ohio State's run game panic level is DEFCON 1. Forget about the passing. Forget about the elements. Obviously, that's going to have a major part in Ohio State struggling to throw. The wind. Guys, the major issue with Ohio State, they cannot run the ball on short yardage situations. This is a trend. This is 3 straight weeks. Ohio State has completely turned into a one-dimensional team. Trevion Henderson is injured. Normally, they've got that great running back tandem. You've got the bigger back in Mayan Williams. You've got the faster, Trevion Henderson. With just Mayan Williams back there, Ohio State becomes extremely easy to defend in terms of, them trying to run the football on 3rd and short, 4th and short. There was a sequence in the Northwestern game in the first half. Ohio State had 3rd and 1, didn't get it, they punted. They got the ball back, they had 3rd and 1, lost a yard, 4th and 2, Ryan Day goes for it, they get stuffed again on the run. 3 times in the span of 2 drives, they got stuffed on 3rd and 4th and short. This is a trend. This is a major concern for Ohio State. Their offensive line simply not good enough in terms of run blocking. They're getting pushed off the ball. Number 4, if LSU wins out, they are in. So I know everyone is kind of, no 2-loss teams can make the playoff, things like that. But there's been situations in the past where if a 2-loss team would have won, they would have been in. It happened with, I believe, Auburn. If they would have won the SEC championship a few years ago as a 2-loss team, they would have been in. So yeah, guys, LSU, right now, they actually have 2 kind of tough road games at Arkansas, although Arkansas just lost to Liberty, but on the road at Arkansas, and then I think at A&M. So, we will see with LSU. Also, I think they face UAB, who isn't terrible. It is a situation. LSU goes to the SEC championship as a 2-loss team. They beat undefeated Georgia, who would be the number 1 team in the country, and they would be the first 2-loss team to make the college football playoff. There's no doubt in my mind. Do I think it's going to happen? No. No, I do not. That's why it's a hypothetical. It's unlikely, but they would be in if they win out. Michigan's non-conference may kill them. So guys, right now it's setting up. The loser of the Ohio State-Michigan game still has a chance to make the playoff. The issue, let's say Ohio State beats Michigan. Right now, I think the FPI gives Ohio State a 70% chance to beat Michigan at home. They're going to be like 7-point favorites, whatever. Ohio State beats Michigan. Michigan is a 1-loss team, and their non-conference is so bad, I don't think there's any way they make the playoff unless there is absolutely chaos. You're going to need Oregon to lose again. You're going to need TCU possibly to lose twice because of Michigan's non-conference being so historically bad, where they scheduled 3 of the top 10 worst teams in FBS on their non-conference. It will kill them, as opposed to Ohio State. You've got Notre Dame in your non-conference, who's a top 20 team according to FBI. You've got Toledo in your non-conference, who's a top 80 or I think top 70 team. Michigan, it's just so bad. And I think it could kill them if they lose, even if they lose a close game to Ohio State. All Michigan had to do was play that home and home with UCLA, get a big win against UCLA, and even if you lose to Ohio State at the end of the regular season, you're sitting pretty with a good non-conference schedule. You've got a huge win over Penn State, and possibly a loss, your only loss being to Ohio State on the road. You would have a very good chance of getting in, but because their non-conference is so historically bad, the committee may punish them, and even if they lose a close game to Ohio State, they might be out. Number 6, the Heisman will depend on C.J. Stroud versus Michigan. If C.J. Stroud throws for 4 touchdowns and Ohio State beats Michigan, he wins the Heisman. If he loses, he's not getting the Heisman. I don't know who gets it. If he loses, maybe Hendon Hooker's still involved. Maybe Blake Corum if he has a big game against Ohio State. But it's pretty cut and dry at this point. As long as C.J. Stroud doesn't face gale force winds, he's going to run up his stats, probably 4 or 5 touchdown passes against Indiana, and then probably similar stats at Maryland, setting up that Michigan game where he should be at around 38, 39 touchdown passes. He has a big game against Michigan. He wins the Heisman. If he doesn't, the Heisman is wide open. Do you give it to Bo Nix? Do you give it to Caleb Williams? That would be kind of a tough pill to swallow because those guys have been really irrelevant in the race, but it's a situation. Right now, you've got the 2 favorites. They just played horribly. With Stroud, it's tough because of the wind. Hendon Hooker, that was his Heisman moment. It didn't happen against Georgia. It is what it is. Number 7, Georgia isn't repeating. Sorry. So yes, guys, I've said that I'm standing by this take 100%. Georgia, they beat Tennessee at home. Let's understand a few things about this Tennessee team. We knew they struggled in the secondary. We knew that before the season. Nobody thought Tennessee was a top 10 team. I understand they played well. They beat Alabama at home. You know, that game was really a flip of the coin. They could have lost it. Georgia, to me, is still losing in the playoffs to someone. I don't think they have a good enough offense. It was an impressive win, but I 1,000% stand by my take. They're not repeating, and that's something that I'll stand by. Clemson and the ACC are done. So, yes, guys, of course, it always seemed like Clemson was fake this year due to their quarterback situation. DJ Uiagalelei just hasn't been developed properly by Clemson, in my opinion. This is a top 5 overall recruit who really has regressed since his freshman season, and the offense isn't good enough, and really the defense has been kind of a letdown too, so that one loss pretty much kills them. Of course, there could be a situation where, let's say, TCU loses, Oregon loses, USC loses, so the Pac-12 is out, possibly the Big 12 is out. Then you would need a situation, like Georgia beating LSU, so LSU has 3 losses, so maybe only one SEC team makes it. But then, of course, the Big Ten situation, and you would possibly have both Michigan and Ohio State both above Clemson with 1 loss or 0 losses. So, yeah, and the other thing is Clemson's resume just keeps getting crushed. Wake Forest looks terrible against NC State. They lose, although I will say Clemson also beat NC State. And then how about Syracuse? That quality win that Clemson had over Syracuse is completely gone. Number 9, TCU will lose to Texas. So, guys, TCU, for as good as they've been, they've got a road game at Texas, and I think, we've seen it week in and week out with TCU. They go down in the third quarter. They come back. It can work against Texas Tech. It can work at home. It can work against Oklahoma State. But I do believe Texas is going to be very motivated. They need to win these games to have any chance at making a really good bowl, considering they already have 3 losses. I think Texas gets the job done at home against TCU, and that possibly could knock TCU out of the playoffs depending on how everything sets up. TCU, we are expecting to be ranked inside of the top 5 on Tuesday night. USC's roster isn't good enough this year. So yeah, guys, for all the transfers that USC has gotten, their defensive roster is really lacking, and Lincoln Riley has done a really good job his first year at USC, but overall, I just don't think it's a talented enough roster to contend for the national championship this year. We saw they allowed, what did they allow? 35 points to a horrible California offense. Tulane got bailed out by a QB injury. Yes, guys, a lot of people like Tulane. They're a darling. But what you don't know is Tulsa's starting quarterback was injured. This game was ripe for an upset. I called an upset. Nobody knew that Tulsa's starting quarterback was injured. He didn't even play a snap. Tulane only scored 27 points. But because people don't realize the context, Tulane's going to get rewarded for this win when really they got lucky that Tulsa's starting quarterback was out. The Big Ten West is a terrible division. Yes, it was setting up like Illinois. They were going to face Michigan, second to last game of the season. They were going to be ranked inside the top 15. Horrible loss to Michigan State at home. Now it's just one big giant cluster in the Big Ten West. There's really nothing else to say about that division. It is horrible. My only hope is that we get some new blood from that division in the Big Ten Championship, preferably either Illinois or Purdue. We will see. Although I think, didn't Purdue just get crushed by Iowa? Yeah, they did. Number 13, Baylor is a top 20 team. Baylor's just a really good football team. They beat Oklahoma on the road as 3.5-point underdogs, 38-35. They've got a good defense. They've got a really solid offense. They are a top 20 team. I fully expect them to be ranked. Also, Notre Dame will be ranked in the next poll. Miami and Texas A&M are NIL dumpster fires. So, yeah, I don't know what is going on with these programs. Obviously, with A&M and Miami, especially Miami, man, I don't know. That was a horrible performance against Florida State. They really are just having, who knows? I don't know where Miami goes because it's like they play in an NFL stadium. They have a horrible atmosphere. That's not going to get better. So it seems so bleak right now for Miami. Fresno State is legit now. Bet on them. Fresno State is crushing everyone. They got their, NFL draft prospect quarterback back last week. They are possibly like a top 25 team with their starting quarterback. They are throttling people. They're impressive, guys. Get in on them. And then the Big Ten possibly with 2 teams in. So it really depends how everything shakes out. But we're still looking at Michigan, Ohio State, that last game. Both of those teams with 0 losses. The question becomes, does the loser of that game get into the playoffs? And it really depends what happens with the SEC. You've got Alabama completely out of the playoffs. You have Tennessee lingering there with 1 loss. And you've got LSU with 2 losses. Let's say Georgia beats LSU. They're undefeated. They're in as the 1 seed. Let's say Ohio State beats Michigan. They're the 2 seed. You've got an interesting situation now where you have the situation. What if TCU loses, possibly knocking the Big 12 out? The Pac-12 eats itself. You would need Oregon, I think, to lose one more game. I think right now, if Oregon wins out, unless you get a scenario with the SEC, they could be in. Because they have a resume to where their only loss is a horrible loss, but it was week 1, and they're building a good resume with pretty solid wins, and they also have Utah coming up on their schedule at home. And this is why before the season I said I thought Oregon was a dark horse team. Their schedule was set up so nicely to where they played all their tough games at home. Oregon might be a team we start talking about getting in, but if Oregon loses again and USC loses again, the Pac-12 is out, and you're looking at maybe Tennessee as a one-loss team that doesn't even make the conference championship getting in, and maybe Michigan getting in as well. But like I said, I think that non-conference schedule is going to hurt Michigan significantly here. So we will see what happens. It is an interesting thing to take into account. But guys, those are my my top 16 biggest hot takes for week number 10. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.